Hello, welcome to TRT World Forum Digital Debates. My name is Talip Küçükcan. Today we will be talking about the position and coverage of the media with regard to the 15th of July failed coup attempt in Turkey. Our guest is Mr. Resul Serdar Ataş, who is a senior fellow at the TRT World Research Center. Before moving on to the points of discussion, I just would like to introduce him to our audience very shortly. Resul Serdar Ataş serves as the COO of Narrative House, a values-driven content creation company, where he leads the implementation of the business strategy of the company. Previously, he served as the director in the founding team, which successfully launched the two international channels, TRT World and TRT Arabi, and he managed the Middle East desk at Al Jazeera Turk for some time. He served as the director of news programs, digital and visual at TRT Arabi, the Istanbul-based international news channel with a focus on the MENA region. So he has a lot of experience in international journalism. Ataş was the TRT World's founding managing editor and director of current affairs and programs, while he was also at Euronews editorial board member. Before working at this position, he worked as head of the Middle East desk at Al Jazeera Turk, which was a sister channel in Al Jazeera Media Network. Now, he is currently attached to the TRT World Research Center as a senior fellow. Mr. Serdar Ataş, welcome to our program. Thank you for accepting our invitation. We will begin with your personal experience on the 15th of July, when there was a coup attempt in Turkey, whereby 251 people lost their lives in defense of Turkey's democracy and thousands were injured. Where were you at the time? What was your initial reaction? What were the sort of information that you received? And when did you decide that that was really a coup attempt?
Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be with you, to be honest. So at that night, I remember that we were covering the Nice attack. One of the terror group Daesh, member of Daesh, by a truck or a van, as far as I remember, they just got over the people in the city of Nice in France. And we were conducting a special coverage regarding to that, deploying lots of our journalists from TRT World, correspondent, producers. And I remember a couple of the teams were on the field. So it was quite a busy night, because that attack was something horrible that whole world was just covering intensely. And it was close to 9 p.m. or something like that. I could see that in the WhatsApp groups, there were some of the discussions that something weird is just happening. The warplanes were just flying very much low in Ankara. That was the whole information that we had. But it could be maybe a drill, an exercise, a military exercise, or something unusual. Our first reaction was not that this is a coup attempt at all. Then just maybe a couple of minutes after that, we received the news that the soldiers from the Turkish military has closed the Bosphorus bridge, which connects Asian side to the European side, and it's very much strategically important. Once you close that bridge, almost you cut off the two parts of the city from each other. So by that time on, our first initial thinking was most probably they have received an information that there will be an attack from a terror group like Daesh or like PKK. That was the first reaction of people in the newsroom by that time, because remember, just in 2016, by that time, there were lots of terror attacks from Daesh and PKK, including and lots of explosions in Istanbul. So that was something usual that we were expecting for that, even though it was very much suffering and sorrowful for the nation, but that was what was happening by that time. Then I have been informed, because I was the only manager at the newsroom by that time, was around a time that was close to 10 p.m., I think. And I was the only manager in the newsroom by that time. The security of TRT World, one of the member of security guys of TRT World just got into the newsroom and informed me that soldiers with 3 trucks, military trucks, vehicles, are just in front of TRT World headquarters in Istanbul. And I was quite surprised, to be honest. And I had made some of the calls. So they also didn't have an answer. People knew that what's happening, something weird is happening, something very much unusual is happening. This is not only about the breach, but it is something that is nationwide quite important. And just remember, by that time, the relationship between Turkey and Russia also was very much deteriorating, and the relations were very much sour. Even I thought the possibility of maybe a total attack from Russia, because just Turkish military shot down one of the Russian airplane that violated Turkish airspace in Syria. And that was even one of the possibility. The other possibility for me, by that time, when I have been informed that the soldiers are just trying to get into the TRT's headquarters in Istanbul, one of the possibility that I have thought was maybe these soldiers are here to protect particularly the expat journalists, because that could be maybe an ideal target for Daesh, just to make a spectacular attack and worldwide to be just like breaking news. That was also one of my concerns, and it was the concerns of the management of the channel as well. By that time, we have enhanced the security, loss of the security layers, and so on. Then I got out of TRT world, and I have seen the soldiers that are just coming in and threatening the security guys, so asking them to lay down.
So they were not friendly.
Not friendly at all. And then they just got out of the truck.
By the way,
yeah, please go on.
TRT headquarters in Ankara was, I think, occupied, taken over by soldiers for some time.
I think it happened.
Did you knew that?
After TRT World. It happened after TRT World. TRT World has been seized by the pushes before TRT Ankara's headquarters.
Right. Okay, please just go ahead, because this is the critical moment that you have, I think, experienced.
Then the soldiers got out of the trucks, and they were very much rough and rude. So they got into TRT World, and they started to break down all of the glasses and tourniquets at the entrance of the channel. And by that time, I understand that this is definitely not friendly, and these guys are not here to protect us or the journalists, Turkish or expat journalists. And then I asked them what's happening. They just asked us, okay, leave the building for your security. For the sake of your own security, just leave it. Then I said, look, we are on air. We are covering Nice, and it is a special cover. Even if it's not a special cover for a journalist, particularly if you're a manager in a channel, the worst case scenario is the broadcasting being stopped. It's the worst case scenario. So it doesn't matter what, show must go on. And these guys got entering that very much rudely. They just pushed me away. They got into the newsroom, and they started to pull off all of the switch. They didn't know how to stop the broadcasting. So they got into the gallery and asked people to leave. The gallery, you know that this is the brain of the whole broadcasting, because all of the commands need to come from the gallery to the studio and to the EP desk and so on. So the brain has been destroyed. An empty gallery, presenter on the studio, and having a guest, by the way, in the studio at that time. They just got into the studio and asked them to leave. And we were just on air.
It was on live, that means. So
yeah, we were on air. It was a live event. The TRT World just was on screen of TRT World. You could see the soldiers just come in and asking the presenters very much rudely just to leave the studio. And suddenly, the studio has been empty. Our live camera just showing the empty studio, and our screen the same. So they got all of the journalists just in front of TRT World and asked them to leave. So we understand that this is something very much unusual. And also the rumors just came that this is a coup attempt. So once we figured out that this is a coup attempt, and we asked them, is this a coup? To be honest, they rejected it. No, it's for your security. We are taking measures. So, but I received a call that this is a coup attempt, and just try not to leave your post. But the doors of the entrance of TRT were already blocked by the soldiers by that time, and they grabbed our phones. All of the TRT staff's phone have been taken. Just right after that, they have been cut off from the world. And we just, a couple of minutes, maybe I will say roughly around 30 minutes, something like that, the people got in front of TRT World, and a gathering just happened, and they started chanting against the pushes and the coup attempt. It was a great feeling of knowing that you are not alone in this journey.
Right here, I think that's a fascinating personal experience, at the first-hand experience as a journalist. You have lived through the night on the 15th of July. Now, I just would like to move on to a little bit more professional side of it. You know, the Turkish media played a role, I think, in informing people and also in motivating people. What was the initial reaction of Turkish media? Because you were there, it was not only, I think, TRT, but also some private channels were also, I think, occupied by the pushists.
Definitely. CNN Turk has been seized by the pushists, the attempters. That was also another channel, except TRT. And by that time, of course, TRT's Ankara's headquarters also have been seized by the pushists. To be honest, you know, Turkey, it's not a secret. Like many countries, it's politically divided, and media landscape also in these countries is quite politically divided. But at that night, something beautiful happened regarding to the media, except some of maybe the marginal, ideologically positioned channels or the local channels, some of the newspapers or the digital platforms. But in general, there has been a unified voice. Once it was clear that this is a coup attempt, the major players in the Turkish media landscape have unified, and that was a great unified voice of very much steely and with a determination condemning the coup attempt. All of the important major players in the Turkish media have unified against the coup attempters. They knew that this is a very much historical night, that it could be the point of no return for this country. If the push succeeds, this is going to be beginning of a very much dark period for the democracy in this country, which this nation has suffered a lot to build that democracy through the decades. And of course, Turkish media and Turkish nation was very much fed up with such actions in this country. Just remember that it happened in 60, it happened in 72, it happened in 80, it happened in 97. And it was like, enough is enough. There was no reason, of course, in any way, there is no reason that could justify a coup attempt, but particularly in 2016, by 15th of July, there could not be any reason that could justify the coup attempt, because just that government 5-6 months ago had a fair and free election, and they received 50% of the support of 50% of the nation, and the economy was doing really great. And on the other hand, security-wise, Turkey, the situation in the country was under the control. So there was no reason for that. Political stability was there, economic stability was there, security stability was there. So people were very much angry to the pushes. That's why I will say that the Turkish media has been tested and it did really great.
Can you please tell us the difference between the previous coups that were, all the coup attempt in a sense succeeded, but the media landscape was really very much divided, and the mainstream media have supported the coup attempts in the 1960s, in the 1971, in 1980, and especially in 1997, 28th February, let's say postmodern coup was instigated by the media to a large extent. Why that suddenly changed?
Well, I will say that Turkish media by that time has been transformed a lot. It was not the media of 60s, not media of 72 or 80 or 97. Just remember that Turkish military in this country is not just an organization of hundreds of the soldiers who have weapons. It was something more than being an army. It was also a business organization. It was also a media organization, an intelligence organization. And it was a political actor also in this country. Just remember during 90s, 80s, or 70s, if there were two different presses, one being conducted by the prime minister of the country and the other one by the chief of the staff, most probably 90% of the journalists will go to the presser of the chief of staff instead of going to the presser of the prime minister of this country, because everybody will know that the presser that's coming from the chief of the staff is much more going to be determinative than prime minister's politics or whatever he's saying. So that was the reality of this country. But by 2016, I think the current government, our party's government, had already initiated lots of reforms regarding the democratizing the country. And the army was not that by that time. Army was not that much influential over the mediascape. It was not that much influential over the economy in this country anymore, over the intelligence anymore, over the NGOs anymore. In Turkey, army was a political actor, an NGO, an economical giant. So that was one of the main differences. And the second difference, I will say, by that time, we need to see that there was already a revolution rise up in the middle classes in this country. Just by even beginning of 2000s, you will see that in Turkey, there is a group of rich people, and then the rest of the nation was very much under a poverty. So in this country, traditionally, the middle class was not that much wide and broad as it is today. So the revolution that is remarkable that happened through the reign of AK Party, I will say, is the rise of a wide, comprehensive, very much dynamic middle class in this country. And once you have a strong, wide, and broad middle class, it is hard for the pushists to find the people of buying the idea of a coup.
I think
because in the middle class, not just. Yeah, go on, please.
I think that's a very important observation of the social and economic transformation that Turkey has gone through in the last maybe 2-3 decades. So it is not only the, I think, the transformation of journalism, but it is a wider context, the wider environment, I would say. I think that's critical. We can maybe also...
Even the transformation of the media also is a kind of reflection of the transformation of the middle class in this country.
Right, I think that's an important observation, because when we look at the reaction of the Turkish people in general, I think there was also a unified voice across political divide, across economic classes in Turkey. Yeah,
because the middle class is not just something that is about the economy; it's also a mentality as well. The middle class definitely ask for the stability, political, economical stability. They do not get into such adventures that will break their tomorrows. And this government could give them a tomorrow. But the pushes definitely didn't have any story that will justify and satisfy them. And you could see that the real reaction among the nation came from the middle classes. And once the middle class got into the streets, then there was nothing for the pushes to do except killing.
Resul, you said that there was a unified voice or reaction in the Turkish media, and that is a unique experience as far as Turkish political history is concerned. And also, I think media played a very critical role in, let's say, bridging the gap between Turkish public and the president on that night, because FaceTime appearance on CNN was a critical moment. Can you please just share your observation on how that played out on the streets and in, I think, bringing down the pushists?
Look, in critical times, you know, that strong leadership is really the key. So by that time, in the previous governments, there were always doubts, and the leadership was not strongly that much apparent in 60s, in 72, in 80, 97. But this time, one of the differences regarding to the previous coup attempts or the coups was that in Turkey there was a strong leadership which knew what it wants. So presidents call for people to get into the streets and to gather in the headquarters, in the squares. That was very much a clear ask and call for the nation. So nation has been led very much wisely and bravely, to be honest. So once nation has got this call, they didn't have any doubt. They didn't have any dilemma for that. So the leader is asking, a leader that has a legitimacy, has a popular support, and has a success story, by the way. So they got into, they follow that kind of command. It was not only a call. The nation regarded it as a kind of command, and they knew that this is the point where the fate of this country, the future of this country, is going to be dramatically shaped. And everyone, including pushists, by that moment they knew that whoever loses tonight is going to be the absolute loser, and whoever wins is going to be the absolute winner. There was not a middle way at all. So pushists were very much determined, and the nation also was very much determined. Look, this coup attempt, this was a very much sophisticated, well-planned coup attempt that has been defeated by people's will and by the technology of 21st century. At that night, when the President Erdogan, through the FaceTime, just connected to CNN and asked nation to get into the streets and the squares in the country and the airports, that has been the turning point. So people's will and the technology of 21st century have played a key role. And of course, we shouldn't underestimate the coup attempt, that these guys had a bad planning. No, they had a very much sophisticated planning, to be honest. Even maybe in a certain level, it was much detailed than the previous coup attempts. Maybe the playbook was a little bit of 70s, but in any way, it was a very much sophisticated and well-planned coup attempt.
Right, I think that was a critical moment when President Erdogan appeared on CNN and invited people to the streets to defend democracy. That is an important moment. But the role of the media was not limited to that, I think, because there was a popular resistance, and almost 30 days people were on the streets calling for the consolidation of democracy and calling for the accountability of those people and bringing them to justice. I think media continued its role. Maybe you can share your views on this continuation as well, even until today, because today is the fourth, I think, anniversary of the coup attempt. And when we look at the media coverage, still we see that there is a lot of condemnation of the media, call for consolidation of democracy in Turkey. I think the role of the media still continues in that regard.
That's true. I mean, media still, when it comes to July 15, the coup attempt of July 15, is still unified in that sense. So it's playing a very well role in this case, because by the time, just the media also rediscovered this terror organization is called as FETÖ. Even by that time, some of the people having doubts that, is it that much sophisticated? Is it that much infiltrated into the state institutions? That was a question. Yes, people knew that it's very much dangerous, it's very much powerful, that has structured itself into the state institutions through the decades, but people will not expect them to be that much powerful. So they rediscovered it, and they knew that this is not something that will be underestimated. Today, still Turkey is unified when it comes to that, despite being very much, I would say, polarized when it comes to some of the other politics, internal and international politics. It's not a secret. There are lots of different approaches from the Turkish main opposition parties and the other opposition parties with the ruling party in this country. And when it comes to this case, yeah, it is very much clear that it was a terror organization, very much powerful, maybe one of the most powerful terrorist organizations globally. So that's why media is still, when it comes to that, the major players at least are on the same page when approaching this terror organization and realizing that which kind of danger was that at that night that Turkey somehow survived from.
Resul, Serdar, you are a well-experienced journalist in international news, international coverage. You have experience in Al Jazeera, Al Jazeera was an important, I think, place for you. And also you were leading TRT Arabi, you were involved in TRT News. So you had lots of contacts with the world outside, and you have also, I think, followed how the events unfolding on the 15th of July were covered by the Western media or the media outside Turkey. What's your view on that? I mean, how they have covered the events on that night?
Well, that's a sad story. That is where the sad story starts, to be honest, begins. Turkish media has been tested, and I think it did great. But when it comes to the international media, it was a sad story. Because just remember all of that disinformation that has been spread by the very much well-known global media organizations, including CNN, BBC World, and Al Arabiya. So just think of all of that made-up stories that President Erdogan got on the plane, and he's just escaping to leaving the country and heading to Germany or heading to Qatar and so on, while the president was in his plane and just heading actually to the heart of the crisis, Istanbul airport by that time. So, and even lots of, I will say, kind of celebration-like coverage style of the international media, that this is end of the Islamist government in Turkey, that the secular army in the country is trying to save the secular identity of this country that has been shaped by the Kemalism and by that, so on and so on. It was a kind of celebration, a festival that was going on in the international media. So why that has happened? I will say there are a couple of the factors there. We need to be very much aware of that. First, fact check process in the international media, unfortunately, is very much ignored, particularly recently. And second, international media, which the organization that we call them international media, has been very much politicized. For example, today, we just know that CNN, doesn't matter what, is against President Trump, or New York Times. And on the other hand, we know that doesn't matter what, Fox News supports President Trump. It's a shame.
But some might argue, Resul Serdar, some might argue that that is a freedom of thought, freedom of expression, taking positions.
Freedom of expression is the loyalty to the truth, to the facts. So you cannot be categorically, if you are a source of information, you cannot be categorically be supportive of someone or a certain government or being against it. So that is the issue with it. So it has been politicized so much. On the other hand, the lack of in-depth information in the newsrooms is another problem. And you will hear that a lot, particularly from the Western journalists, that, you know, for that we need a fresh look. What do you mean by a fresh look? So a Western journalist just coming and reading some of the articles and just informing people about that country, and they regard it as a fresh look. To be honest, I do not respect that approach at all, because it ignores the in-depth knowledge and the historical transformation of that region, or the dynamics that is shaping and making that country. So lack of in-depth information is another story. And the other factor was the prejudices that has been promoted through the last decade against President Erdogan himself, against Turkey, and against the fear of Islam, or the fear of that rising of Islam, so-called Islam in this country. Lots of that prejudices, all of that layers, they came together, and they were almost celebrating that and selling the story that the pro-democracy secular army in this country is trying to save the country from the Islamists. So even though it was a clear coup attempt against fairly and freely democratically elected government. So that's why it was a sad story for the international media. So that's why I think the international media really needs to be criticized again, reviewed again. And that's why it is suffering now. They are losing the viewerships, the readers, That's one of the other reasons. So, and that's why new alternative platforms are just coming up, because the traditional conventional media has politicized itself so much, has lost its loyalty to the truth and the facts so much that the credibility is very much low. Just think of that. In the election, during the Nixon's presidential campaign, the credibility of the media has dropped to 46%, which means that 58% of people believe that media is biased and is not giving the truth by that time. And I'm talking about 70s. And then in 2016, when there was a kind of competition and contest between President Trump and Hillary Clinton by that time as the candidate for the Democratic Party, the credibility of the media, based on the clear and trustable sources, I'm saying that, the research, the credibility of the media has been reduced to 36%, which is a very sad story. That 64 people out of 100 believes that media is just fooling them, is just giving them disinformation, and is not telling the truth. So that's why the international, it's a good time for the international media really to review all of the principles again.
Right. Okay. I think there is a lot of truth in what you have said concerning the conventional media and the rise of alternative medias. I just would like to hear from you, what are the main reasons behind the shift as far as international media's coverage of Turkey is concerned? Because some years ago, Turkey was presented as a model country. Turkey was very much praised, its economic growth, its reforms in political area. What happened that the international media started to change their positions?
Well, I think the first reason is the Arab Spring. Till Arab Spring, Turkey's politics, international politics, and particularly Europeans and Americans' international politics was overlapping. They were almost in the major geopolitical issues on the same page, and Turkey was being promoted as a role model for the rest of the region. It was only being promoted as the only Islamic country that has a successful democratic model. And AK Party was the rising star. President Erdogan by that time was the prime minister of the country. He was the rising star and being promoted a lot. But by the rise of the Arab Spring, just right after the Arab Spring, I think they have realized that fair and free elections in this region could be a problem for them. And the fall of President Hosni Mubarak in Egypt, and then right after the first democratic election, maybe the only democratic election in the history of Egypt, that Mohamed Morsi, who was linked to Muslim Brotherhood, came to power as the president of the country. It was a scary scenario for that, because they knew that in case of fair and free elections, at the end of the day, conservative parties are going to be governing these countries. And once the conservative governments are there and prioritizing their national interest, lots of things could be reviewed again. Just remember, right after Mohamed Morsi being the president of Egypt, had an interview with New York Times, and New York Times asked him, are you going to review Camp David? Are you going to really just disrupt all of your relations with the USA or Israel and so on? He will say, no, I actually want to keep the stability, but nothing is going to be like before. Egypt's national interest are our priorities. If it is against our national interest, then yeah, we are definitely going to review it. And Turkey has very much rightly positioned itself in supporting the demand for the change in Syria, in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Libya, and so on and so on. So the answer for the question of which kind of region has differed. Turkey's answer was different. Europeans and Americans' answer was quite different. Europeans, I believe that Europeans and European countries and the USA was desperately asking for the status quo just to remain, because they knew that if the status quo is just shaken or smashed down, the new regional order that is emerging is not going to be that much easy for them to manage. On the other hand, Turkey knew that if a new regional order just emerged, and if the governments are being elected by fair and free election, the national will just manifest itself through the governments, it will be easier for Turkey. It will be very much beneficial for Turkey. So these different positions has created soured relations between two parties. And since that on, you will see that starting from 2010, 2012 on, particularly when the Arab Spring got into a military conflict in Libya, in Syria, and then in Yemen, and so on. So that has been the scary scenario for them. For Europeans, it was not, the Arab Spring was not the kind of spring that's demanding democracy or the change, but rather it has been reduced into a security issue. So then they have started to problematize Turkey's policies also in the region. I think after that, of course, Turkey means President Erdogan, because he was a symbolic leader, not only a political leader, by what he has done for this country. He has been a symbolically very much important leader. So they start to demonize President Erdogan and his ruling party and so on. So that was, I think, the critical point. It was the breakdown for that approach.
Resul, Serdar, you have pointed out that the not necessarily the coup attempt, but there is a larger context that you need to look at in order to see the reasons behind the coverage of Western media. Of course, that brings us to the current activism of Turkey, especially in the MENA region. When you look at Turkey, it's in Libya, it's in Syria, in a sense, to defend its own, I think, priorities, and also in the Eastern Mediterranean. How this international context play a role in the coverage of international media of Turkey?
I think still the same approach is there. Doesn't matter what are the facts in any way, all of that prejudices, fact-checking, lack of fact-checking process, lack of in-depth information, and of course, newsrooms being that much politicized is still reflecting and manifesting itself through the coverage. So what's happening in Libya is very much a simple case that's happening. A country that is invited by internationally recognized government, recognized by the UN, by the United Nations. So that government is inviting another country for the support. Look, I'm having my PhD in international law, and my particular topic for my thesis is what are the conditions, what makes an international military intervention legal regarding to the international law. There are three factors. All of the others are just disputable. So three factors. If the United Nations Security Council decides a military intervention into any country, that will be international legal. Doesn't matter whether it's ethical or not. Or if a country is being attacked directly by another country, it can deploy its military. And the third one, if a legitimate government that is recognized by the United Nations invite another country, that country can have that the invitee by deploying the military there. So internationally recognized Libyan government is inviting a country to defend itself because it's not capable of defending itself. So internationally, there is regarding to the international law, there is no dispute in this case, right? But what is then the problem? I think here it's not about the morality or ethical, it is rather about the geopolitics. So what Turkey is doing there definitely is not beneficial for many of the powerful countries approaching that regarding to United Nations, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, France, to a certain extent, Germany or Russia, that is playing an active role in terms of the coverage or the approach of covering Turkey's international politics.
Well, thank you, Resul, Serdar, Ataş. I think that was a very clear answer. And we come to the end of our session and interview. Thank you very much for joining us. We have really enjoyed it. And hopefully we will continue our conversation with intellectuals, leaders on the regional issues. Thank you for joining TRT World Forum. See you soon.
Thank you.